Hello and welcome to a Therapeutic Hour. I'm your host, Michelle Overton. Whether you're here because it feels dark, you feel stuck, or you simply want to understand yourself better, you're in the right place. With over 400 types of therapy out there, it's no wonder it's hard to know where to begin. Join me and my guests as we demystify therapy and support you to self-heal. So settle in, relax, and let's begin your journey inwards together. This is a Therapeutic Hour. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Myira Khan. Myira is a multi-award-winning, accredited psychodynamic counsellor, supervisor, coach and trainer, as well as the founder of the Muslim Counsellor and Psychotherapist Network. With over 14 years of clinical experience, Myira has made significant contributions to the field of mental health, delivering workshops, trainings and events internationally on working within diversity and anti-oppressive practice. Let's welcome Myira. Hey, welcome Myira. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. So I've been really looking forward to meeting with you again. And so I know that you've been working in the field of psychotherapy for a number of years now. And I thought it'd be really interesting to hear more about really what motivated you to become a psychotherapist.
It's an interesting one because I share this with a lot of people that when I started my training as a counsellor, I never actually imagined me working as a therapist afterwards. I did all the training out of interest, and my tiny little ambition at the time when I started my core training was, of course, we needed to be on placement. And the placement I got was at the University Student Counselling Service. And my entire ambition at that point was, for the half a day that I was there on placement, seeing 2 to 3 clients a week, I thought I'd love to get paid just for that. Like my ambition at the time was, it would be great to be there half a day, and if I could get anything more, then fine. And I'm actually really grateful for, in a way, the lack of ambition I had. Because it meant then that everything that I have done since then has emerged and evolved and has just been part of my journey and part of my curiosity and exploration as I've grown and developed as a therapist. Had I 14 years ago, when I first started working with clients, thought, oh, in 10 years or in 14 years, I want to be doing X, Y, and Z, I think it would have been a lot harder to have got there because I think I would have put too much pressure on myself. So I'm really grateful that I wanted to do this purely out of curiosity and interest.
Hey, thank you for sharing that journey. I could hear that gratefulness. We have a shared journey there. So I also did my placements within the universities. Yes. So it's a very special experience.
Yes. Yeah, specialist experience. And also what I experienced in doing a placement there was that I was really well held by the service, and it did feel like a little family of us doing this work, supporting students through their degrees and through their courses. And so for me it was like, I'll happily stay here doing my half a day a week.
Yeah, lovely, really nicely put. I wanted to ask though, what modality of, or for our listeners, we'll discuss what modality means, but so what type of therapy did you train in, please? What went down, your journey?
Yes. So my core training was in psychodynamic therapy. And that still to this day is kind of at my core of my practice. Since then, I have gone on and done other trainings, but they, for me, are additional and supportive and add-ons to this kind of psychodynamic foundation that I have. And I kind of joke that as a therapist, if you were to kind of slice me through or cut me through like a stick of rock, it would be like psychodynamic. It would be kind of written throughout that core of my practice and my understanding. Yeah.
I really like that analogy. That's brilliant. Yes, so could you tell, for the benefit of our listeners, a little bit more about psychodynamic therapy, please?
Yeah, well, in a nutshell,
Mm,
it is about the recognition that we have an unconscious internal world,
mm,
as well as obviously conscious thought as well. And in this unconscious internal world, we have what's called what I describe as a relationship blueprint.
mm,
And it is that blueprint that gets created in our formative years, in our childhood, that how that blueprint gets literally drawn and created, that's
mm,
the relationship blueprint that we then default to in every relationship then moving forward and into adulthood. And so this idea that we recreate then in adulthood unconsciously the relationships we had as a child.
yeah,
And so very often the difficulties or conflicts or challenges or stresses that we then experience in adult relationships stem from that blueprint being recreated. So we go back to childhood and we go back to understanding how and what that original relationship blueprint is and how it was created.
yeah, I'm taking that in. That's such a simple way to put it about the blueprint.
Yes.
I know I shared with you earlier, so I've been having psychodynamic therapy for the last 3 years, and I found it incredibly helpful on my journey and process of change. So could you tell the listeners a little bit more about, so can we change this blueprint?
I think it's about, first of all, is it kind of almost in steps or stages? It's about understanding, first of all, identifying what the blueprint is
Yeah.
and recognizing, okay, so if this is the blueprint, this is how it gets repeated. So in adult relationships, okay, this is why I then do X, Y, or Z in relationships. This is why I either kind of lean into an anxious attachment or lean out in terms of an avoidant attachment, maybe.
Mm.
And so it isn't necessarily about changing the original blueprint, but rather adding to the blueprint newer adult ways of relating so that we then don't just rely on our original blueprint to recreate all of our relationships. We now have alternative conscious ways of engaging and relating with people.
Yes. So it's making us aware of those blind spots, isn't it? Where we
Yes,
keep replicating those same relationships that are
yes,
not always healthy for us.
exactly. Yes.
Yes, and I noticed something for myself just to share. Actually, only this week, we're always still learning, aren't we? Where I kept having some obsessive thoughts.
Yes,
And it really links to this blueprint of what you're talking about, of where I keep recreating relationships,
yes.
and how we're able to interrupt that and disrupt that then.
Yes, because absolutely. And I think that interruption, disruption of the blueprint is then our new way of relating, a new model of relating starts to get used instead. I often use this metaphor or analogy of our relationship blueprint is a bit like the default printer setting on our laptop. So every
Mm.
time we click print, it just automatically prints, goes to that printer. What we're doing is we're offering alternative printers now. And the more we use that newer printer, our kind of processing, our brain, our internal world goes, oh, Michelle's now using this newer printer. So maybe we can start to make that now our default way of relating.
Yeah.
But we can't do that straight away because our kind of internal world, our internal processing says that no, we've always been using the same printer, the same relationship blueprint since childhood. So that's our default. So
Mm.
we can add into our system like a second printer/relationship blueprint, but it
Yeah.
takes time for that to become the default version.
Yes, and to integrate then.
Yes.
Yes, because this is where, and I've spoken with various different
Mm.
therapists, and it's interesting when we look at, the different, say for me, 3 years in therapy, I'm sure I could actually have a couple more.
Yes.
It has been absolutely invaluable
Yes.
at being able to work through and see what my patterns are.
Yes.
So I'm not too sure where I was going. I think I was validating actually that it's
Mm.
taken me a long time to be able to get there. And sometimes it might feel a bit frustrating for people.
Yeah.
You know, because they feel, oh, I want answers now.
Yeah.
But this is it, isn't it? It's a process.
Absolutely. And also consciously learning and identifying what our relationship blueprint is, that is going to take time, because you've got to remember this blueprint is not only embedded within us as the only way of relating, we have no other option, we have no other choices at the time, but also it's unconscious. So it takes time to bring it into our conscious, which is why it's not just a case of showing up in psychodynamic therapy, you speaking about your relationships, and then poof, there you go, here's your blueprint. It's not that. It's really about deconstructing and dissecting, well, what do you experience in relationships? And particularly at the rupture points in relationships, particularly the stressor points in relationships, what do you do? Because you will be responding, or rather reacting, from your blueprint. And it's only in those moments in relationships can we then start to draw out this blueprint. That I said, in 3 years, it takes time to do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for explaining that. Could you talk about as well? So I noticed like a set of skills that my therapist will use, actually, that are very clever, and I have to go away and do the work.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the skills? Just a little brief overview.
Yeah. So I think there are, in my head, what I would call kind of counselling skills 101, the skills that all therapists have, irrespective of the modality that they use. And those are going to be what every therapist, or what actually anybody could go and learn on like a 10-week introduction to counselling skills course. So it's got nothing to do with modality, but those are skills such as active listening, empathy, building a relationship. They are ways of being. And I always say this about therapy, that we are human beings, not human doings. So all the skills are how we be as human beings. It's not what we do. So we are being empathic. We are being an active listener. We are being attuned and relational with that person in front of us. So those are, for me, kind of the common skills that all therapists will use. On top of that, then you then have the specialist skills or tools or activities that different therapists will use based on the modality that they are using.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. I want to add to that I think that therapy can be one of the first places that we actually feel seen and understood.
Yes.
And, you know, all of those qualities that you've just described, that's what sets the foundation for that relationship, excuse me, to grow. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, so I looked that you are actually have a lot of skills. You are a psychotherapist. I know you're an author, you're a coach, you're a trainer.
Yes.
And I know you've also gone ahead to set up the Muslim Counselling and Psychotherapy Network.
Yes.
So you're doing some amazing work. So I want to just ask you a little bit more about those.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it'd be really helpful for the listeners to hear what the difference is between therapy and coaching.
Yeah. So if we imagine a timeline, and if we place ourselves in the present, in the middle of that timeline, therapy is either going to deal with what's happening for you right now on that timeline, so in the here and now, the present, in that middle of that timeline, that is distressing you or upsetting you, or you need support with, and or it will go back into the past end of the timeline and go into your past and deal with what's happened in your past. So therapy, in terms of a timeline, deals with the past and or present.
Yes.
Coaching is the other half of the timeline. It is based on where you are right now. Let's support you then to find your direction of travel into your future. So for me, they are very complementary, but they are definitely not the same thing.
Yeah, that is really helpful. I know it's a question that I've been asked, quite a few times. So thank you for clarifying that. It's really good. So I wanted to go on to have a look at your inspiration. You know, what was the journey into setting up the Muslim Counselling and Psychotherapy Network, please?
Yeah. So it, again, purely through my own experience, when I was training, I was the only Muslim training on my course.
Yeah.
I was the only Muslim. Then when I started kind of going out into the counselling world, on my placement for 3 years, I was the only Muslim at the university, Muslim counsellor at the university. So I very much felt like, oh, I'm the only one in the village as such. And for me, it was a case of surely there are more. There must be more. And soon after I qualified, I think within a year of qualifying, I was going out to conferences and, building and expanding my kind of experience in the counselling field and in
Mm.
the counselling world. And what I recognised was that there were the odd one or two that I kind of heard about or crossed paths with fleetingly at a conference. But I realised there was nothing that actually at a core level kind of was a home that brought Muslim practitioners together, and that there was this kind of central meeting point or network as such. And so the network, the MCAPN network, started off as a LinkedIn group, which is still there to this day, but it built from that group into going, actually, Muslim practitioners actually need more and are looking for further support. So we set up the network 10, well, actually, we're just coming up, where are we? April 2024. It's been
Mm.
going for 11 years this month. So for
Wow.
11 years,
Mm.
it has supported practitioners to not only network with each other, but also to provide a platform to make Muslim practitioners more visible in the profession. So two of the biggest gems we have from the network then on our website is the Muslim Counselling Directory and the Muslim Supervision Directory. So
Okay.
not only does it allow Muslim practitioners to connect with clients and our communities, really helping to reduce the stigma and taboos about needing or accessing therapy, and for clients and communities to access faith sensitive and culturally sensitive therapy. But also by having the supervision directory, it also offers other practitioners then who are again looking for faith sensitive, culturally sensitive, anti-oppressive supervision. So it's support, it's that peer support as well. It's supporting practitioners to also be amongst other like-minded practitioners, or being around practitioners that are going to help really nourish and support their development and growth in the field.
Yeah. Wow. Actually, yeah, really impressive.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, can you tell us a bit more as well about perhaps the needs of looking for them with clients coming to you? So more about this specialist service of what you're offering.
Yeah. So the counselling directory, similar to the mainstream directories that are out there, they are all independent private practitioners who list themselves on the directory. But what we can then specialise in or offer is to say that they are all Muslim. So as a default, so again, a Muslim client then who's wanting as a preference,
Yeah.
as choice to have a Muslim or see a Muslim counsellor, they're not needing to scroll through and scroll through a mainstream directory trying to identify who might be Muslim. Going straight onto our counselling directory, you can go, right, everyone on here is Muslim. So
Yeah.
tick box, that's done for me. Then we get into the detail of, well, now you get to choose, do you want a male or female practitioner? What specific issues do you want to bring to counselling? So are you looking for a practitioner with a specialist experience of working with a particular issue?
Mhm.
Or, like we've been talking about, do you want a Muslim practitioner who works with a particular modality? And all of that information is on those profiles. So
Yeah.
what it allows Muslim clients and communities to do is actually find the right therapist for them,
Yeah.
beyond for me, the basic of them being Muslim, because
Yeah.
that part's been taken care of. So it's very much a case of, no, I want a counsellor or therapist that works with a particular modality, works with a particular client group, or works with a particular issue. And we can offer that range on our directory. The other big importance with the directory as well is that vast majority of the counsellors listed offer counselling in additional languages. And I lose track. I've counted probably a year ago the number of languages, but I lost track. You are looking at various across the board
Mhm.
African, South Asian, European languages that are
Wow.
offered
Yeah.
alongside, obviously, English. So that's another draw for clients and communities to go, well, actually, I want a practitioner who is, they come with their tick list, Muslim, works with
Mm.
this particular issue, but also can work in my own first language or mother tongue language. So we're removing lots
Incredible.
of barriers for clients and communities to get the therapy that they need.
Yeah, absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Something came to my mind that I was thinking. So many years ago, I worked for Women's Aid.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking back to there was a time where perhaps we might have felt at that time, so we might have been told as well, perhaps, say, an Asian person wouldn't want to come to meet with another person who was Asian within the service because they would be
Yes.
worried about who would know.
Yes.
And know them. So I was just thinking in my mind, now that we're working online, this absolutely opens up people to access
Yes.
anybody if they felt afraid of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we talk, I talk a lot, and in the work that I do around anti-oppressive practice and working within diversity, I do talk about this thing around this spectrum of cultural closeness and cultural distance. And
Yeah.
absolutely, for some clients, they want to see a therapist outside of their own community or culture because there's the advantage of maybe less stigma and taboo, less worry about privacy and confidentiality. Because I'm seeing somebody who's totally removed from my community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. With online working now, it's the best of both worlds. Clients now can see a Muslim therapist, but choose somebody who is hundreds or even thousands of miles away,
Yeah.
knowing that you understand my faith, you understand my culture, but you're not in my community. So it's
Yes.
safe enough, you're close enough, but you're also distant enough to offer me safety in this work. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Could you talk a little bit more as well about, I know you've mentioned a couple of times around stigma and taboo.
Yes.
I think that'd be really helpful to hear more about.
Yes. It's an interesting one because I would say about probably a good 10 years ago, a priority, I think, within lots of minoritized communities was the tackling of stigma and taboo.
Yeah.
And I actually think that a lot of work has been done by various charities and faith community organizations to really tackle the stigma and taboo. It is still there, but I don't believe to the same degree that I saw 10 years ago. And I think that's partly because not only we have done work to tackle it, but also for me, a big positive outcome from the network has been the visibility of Muslim practitioners in the field. Because there's something about when you see, I'm going to use this very generic term, when we see people like us being the practitioner in the field, it opens up the doors for clients to go, well, if you are the practitioner in that field, it must be okay then for me to access it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there is something about we can do the very direct, explicit work around stigma and taboo, but I think the biggest achievement of actually tackling stigma and taboo is the visibility of Muslim practitioners, or actually any minoritized identity practitioner, immediately reduces the stigma and taboo in that community that they represent.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, thank you. I wanted to check in to ask as well, do you notice that there's a difference between, and I'm being gender specific here, but with men and women coming forward for therapy?
Interestingly, I used to hear that a lot.
Yeah.
That more women will want to come for therapy than men. Like men are very resistant. But when I started my private practice, which was 10 years ago now, I actually had a lot of male clients coming.
Yeah.
I think that's because we go back to this thing about they were Muslim men and they wanted somebody Muslim. And so I've never found there being a stark difference between male or female clients coming to therapy with me. I've always felt that I've had a balance between the two. And I think that's partly because being Muslim kind of does remove a big barrier for men and women to come for therapy. But also, I feel like I've been also so visible and open about the work I do, being on social media, now having written a book, doing podcasts like this. I'm very out there in that respect to say, look, this is the work I do.
Mm.
And I think that removes a lot of barriers then for clients to go, oh, well, Myira seems to be like the person that I would be happy going speaking to. And so,
Mm.
yeah, I do get both men and women and couples and children and young people. I work across the age range
Oh, that's
coming
good to
for
know.
therapy. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. I found for me, it's 50-50.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely. When I worked within the university counselling service, we saw nationally, now this is going back 6 years, it'd be
Yes.
interesting to see what it is now, but it was about a third would be male clients that were coming through.
Yes.
So it'd be interesting to see actually how
Yes.
that's, working now.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you've mentioned your book,
Yes.
and I think you have it behind you as
I
well. Yeah.
do.
So
It's here.
it's exciting. So I know
Yes.
this was released last July. So working within
Yes.
diversity.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about this, please, and your work?
Absolutely. I'll pop it back up there so people can see it. So working within diversity, yes, was published last July. It is a comprehensive how-to reflective guide on anti-oppressive therapy, supervision, and any therapeutic or psychological help.
Yeah.
It's absolutely kind of I kind of want to say kind of plants the flag for understanding what anti-oppressive practice is. In a nutshell, it is really about helping practitioners to really understand what we mean by working within diversity rather than with diversity. So for me, the first thing I do in the book is walk us through this pivot
Mm.
from working with diversity to working within, because ultimately all of us in our identities, in our intersectionalities, we all come under the umbrella of diversity. And
Yeah.
so we are always within diversity. If that's the starting point in the book, the rest of the book then is thinking about, right, so how do we actually do that? What does it actually mean to offer an anti-oppressive relationship and practice? I talk about kind of equalizing the power between you and the client, or as a supervisor between me as a supervisor and my supervisees.
Mm.
It's, for me, the biggest shift in our practice at this time,
Yeah.
because it is explicitly challenging how we have traditionally seen and related to this identity label of diversity.
Mm.
And it is shifting the narrative from what has traditionally been listed, on training curriculums over the years, over the decades, as working with diversity and or difference,
Yeah.
which is oppressive in and of itself. And for
Mm.
me, I've created a model so the book goes through a 5-component model of working within diversity. So it's a very simple framework for any practitioner, any helping or therapeutic or psychological practitioner or coaching practitioner, to then
Yeah.
go, oh, well, this is what I need to consider to be offering a relationship that is anti-oppressive, that is equal, that is fair, that is ethical.
Yeah. Lovely. Could you tell me as well then, so your idea for the book, what did you want to really achieve from it?
I suppose, two very kind of general aims, I think. One
Mm.
is to really create an understanding of how we view diversity.
Mm.
And within that, to challenge the fact that I think previously we've viewed diversity as an incredibly othering, marginalizing way,
Yes.
and that diversity only belongs with minoritized identities, and it
Mm.
doesn't. So for me, it was the challenge of that. The second aim then of the book was absolutely then to offer a framework and say, now we know what not to do,
Mm.
not to be working with diversity, not to be othering and marginalizing minoritized identities. Instead, this is how we offer a anti-oppressive practice and position. And the book is then filled with all of the information in order to do that. It's a very practical, hands-on, reflective guide. It has lots of reflective exercises in there. There are specific tools that you can use in session or in your supervision or in your process notes. It's a very interactive guide in that respect. I
Yeah.
didn't want it to be a text academic book, a textbook that was academic where you sat and just read it. and went, okay, now I know stuff. This book is very much about, again, it's about the being, human being, and
Yeah.
how we be in session, not just what you know on a cognitive level.
Yeah. Wow. I'm taking that in. It
Mm.
feels really progressive.
Yes.
You know, that working within, it's a real reframe of that, isn't it?
Yes. And that was that first aim, is the reframing of how we understand diversity. And then the second aim, so what does it then look, now we've reframed it, this is what it can look like in sessions. And for me, then it's really going back to then being in relationship with the client, understanding that in any therapeutic, supervision or coaching relationship, if there are two people in that relationship, it then means that there are two identities in the room in relationship with one another. We are not the blank slate. We are not a neutral, invisible identity in the room. None of us are. We impact the work. We impact on how our clients show up. We impact on whether the client feels safe or not. We impact on what the client feels safe to bring or not to bring.
Yes. It's that whole foundation, isn't it?
Yeah,
I could just keep listening. Yeah. So I know that you're going to be talking at a conference, aren't you, very soon?
Yes.
And that's within the Counselling network.
Yeah. So off the back of the book, I mean, I've been delivering lots of training on anti-oppressive practice and working within diversity even before the book came out. And obviously, since the book's come out, obviously a lot more people have become aware of the work. So throughout this year, I have been and I am for the rest of the year speaking at various counselling conferences and events, as well as delivering training, CPD days on this topic, because it is, like you said, it's so progressive, it's so brand new that for me, the important part now is to really spread the message of it and to really support people to understand the importance of it. Like, why do we need this? Like, it's fundamental, I think, to our ethical working. That we really embrace and understand what anti-oppressive practice is. It's not a tick box exercise. It's fundamentally changing how we actually be in the relationships in our work, but also what we do in it as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So it's an exciting year then coming up for you, isn't it? Of being able to really help therapists in their own practice and how they are supporting, the people that they're working with.
Absolutely. And it's about offering that support and that training in a way that, again, feels accessible, feels applicable, and again, doesn't feel like it's just a tick box or academic exercise. Again, the tools in the book, the concepts that I have coined in the book are all ways of allowing therapists or any practitioner to go, oh yeah, I remember reading about, for example, cultural attunement in the book. And I talk you through how to do that. So what does that, oh, I can remember that, or I can think about that when I'm in session.
Could you talk to me more about this as well, please? That's something I wanted to ask you about, cultural attunement.
Yes. So again, pivoting from working with diversity to working within diversity. Working with diversity, so let me start there. Working with diversity very much supports a competency model, because it says that when we work with diversity, we are determining what you need to cognitively know in terms of knowledge or skills or expertise that makes you competent to work culturally.
Yes.
And it's a set of standards, and it's like an arbitrary set of standards that somebody somewhere has created, which first of all feels like, well, how does that person know, or how does that team know what is deemed as competent? But also it's not measurable. So it kind of falls flat on its face anyway, but also it's incredibly oppressive, because a competency model is about, I use the metaphor of a competency model is the equivalent of the finish line on a race. And it's a bit like, well, once I've done competency training, I've passed the finish line, so therefore I'm competent. But that tells me that you have learnt something in a training session. It does not tell me or indicate what you then do with that knowledge in sessions.
Yes.
I pivot and say, competency is your first step to cultural attunement. Competency is you as a therapist or practitioner going away and reading a book or listening to watching a YouTube video or listening to a podcast that's got something to do with an aspect of your client's identity. But for me, that is the starting point, not the finish line. When we know that what we can do on our own, we've then got to think about, how do I actually be with my client? What is it I need to consider in the room with my client? Competency does not play a part in that. Instead, it's about being attuned to our client, to their lived experience, to their context, to their narrative, to their identities. And so for me, cultural attunement then is sitting on that starting line and coming from a position of not knowing. It is the complete opposite of competency. Competency places you as an expert in a client's culture. We can never be the expert in a client's culture. Instead, we are always on the starting line of not knowing, because we are constantly learning about the client and their culture as we work with them. So cultural attunement is a combination of three facets. It's cultural curiosity, cultural humility, and cultural empathy. And if we can be attuned, if we can be curious, if we can be empathic, if we can be humble in sitting with and honouring and valuing and respecting a client's lived experience, their truth, can we then really start to understand why they experience what they experience and why they feel the way they do about their lived experience? We are, as I said, we are constantly on the starting line for that. There is no way that a competency model, any training you do that says that that we're going to train you being culturally competent, completely misses the client. And yet this is all about being able to sit with the client's lived experience and truth. We can only do that when we're in the room with our client, attuning to them.
Yeah. Wow. Could you repeat those three things?
Yeah. So
it was amazing. Yeah.
So cultural attunement, and it's the term I coined in the book. It is a combination of cultural curiosity, cultural empathy, and cultural humility.
Yeah.
And I know that people, those three facets, those three components, individually, I know people talk about them, but for me, it's the combination of all three that means that we can fully attune to our clients. We kind of need all three. One without the other means that we're actually missing a part of the client.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about having that within your practice, within your knowledge, your skill set, and how that will impact on that relationship of the level of depth that we can have, relational depth.
Yes. And for me, that's really at the heart of anti-oppressive practice, which is understanding what is going on in this relationship. It's all about the relationship. It's about, how do I offer a relationship that's equal? How do I offer a relationship in which my client feels safe? How do I offer a relationship in which my client is able to do the work with me in a way that feels not only safe, but also feels, like you were saying earlier, that they then feel seen and heard and valued.
Yeah. And that they can show up as they are.
Yeah. They can show up fully. They're not having to hide parts of them or their identity or their lived experience, that a client can show up fully and completely with all aspects of their lived experience, knowing that all of it is going to be held with honour and value and respect for that being their truth, that their truth is not being marginalised, minimised or dismissed or devalued in any way, because that's all oppressive processes. So it's ensuring that a client show up fully and in a way that means then that all of their experience then is held and seen, valued, and can be thought about and explored together.
Yeah. Actually, just you saying that just makes you feel warm, doesn't it? You think, oh, amazing work. Could I ask you then? I know we're going to come towards the end soon, and so I wanted to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
So, because you have set up the Muslim Counselling and Psychotherapy Network, and your amazing work that you're doing, what nuggets of wisdom would you say then would you like to give to the Muslim community, say when they're looking for therapy?
The first, I think the most important thing is that you find that when you are searching for a therapist, so even before you've found a therapist, when you go onto the directory, or when you're looking generally, is that you ensure that you are looking for therapists that are qualified and registered.
Yeah.
Because what can often happen is when we go onto Google, you can Google for a therapist and anyone can show up on your search. It's why that the Muslim Counselor Network's own counselling directory supports you to find somebody who's qualified and registered, because everybody on there has been vetted in terms of that they are qualified and they are registered with a
Yes.
professional body. So we've done that hard work for you. But for
Yeah.
somebody then who perhaps hasn't yet found necessarily our directory that they're Googling, if you are Googling, or perhaps you're somebody listening to this, watching this, and you're already in therapy or just started therapy with somebody, check out their qualifications, check out that they're registered. Because the profession is unregulated at the moment, it means that anybody can set themselves up as a counsellor or therapist without being trained, without being fully qualified, without being registered. And because of that, my first thing for any client actually is, when you're looking for a therapist, please make sure you're checking that they are qualified and registered. Then you can start to then look. So that's the first step. So tip number one is check that they're qualified and registered. Tip number two then is, once you've started to find therapists that you go, yeah, they're qualified and they're registered, then it's about thinking about, do they have experience of working with the issues that I want to work on? And then thirdly, the more practical side of things, of what are your preferences? Do you want in-person therapy or do you want online? Do you want a male or female therapist, or any gender specific or preference that you have? And that will go for any other preferences. Do you have preferences in the counselor's identity, faith, age, gender, background, whatever it might be? But those first two, in terms of qualified and registered, and then that you have experience of working with your issues. After that, it's then about thinking about your preferences.
Yeah. Do you know, I might have been being really naive here, because I'm thinking about that. I know we've obviously got your network.
Yeah.
You've got so traditionally, I know people find me through the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy.
Yes.
We've got the counselling directory,
Yes.
Psychology Today. And I genuinely hadn't thought about that. There's still people out there that are not qualified and registered that are offering counselling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there
Yeah.
are and I'm aware that there are directories that list people that are not registered.
Right.
And especially directories where a practitioner can go online and just create an account and upload a profile,
Yeah.
and their qualifications and or registration is not being checked. And there are also now directories that are more broader than just counselling and therapy. So some of these more kind of holistic type practitioner directories that might include coaching, that might include like holistic practitioners or nutritionists, far more broader kind of well-being practitioners.
Okay.
Those more general directories will not have the same checks and balances. And
Okay.
so, and equally, if you Google, people are going to have websites that don't even necessarily are on a directory. So you could Google somebody, or you could find somebody through social media and go, I like what they're saying. Oh, they're offering a service. I'll go to them. But it doesn't mean that they are qualified and or registered. So
Cool.
So for me, that's my number one thing for anybody looking for a counsellor, therapist, or psychologist.
Yeah.
Please, please, please make sure that they are qualified and registered with a professional body. And the fact that you can then ask them for their qualifications and registration, and any member of the public then can go on to that practitioner's professional body register and check themselves.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing about these registers, is that they are public registers. So you can check that that practitioner is registered. If they claim to be registered, you can go and do the check yourself.
Yes. Hey, that's absolutely a brilliant way for us to end, isn't it? That's, really pointing people in the right direction of what's safe and what's helpful. So I want to thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you. It's been,
Thanks.
really helpful for our listeners as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And you take care.
You too. Thanks, Michelle. Bye.